Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the session today with Ms. Rema Subramanian, who is the co-founder and managing partner of Ankur Capital. Thank you, Rema, for sparing your precious time to help our startups. Do you wish to say something before we officially begin with taking the query one by one?
Thank you so much for giving me that platform. It's actually a learning time for all of us. Things have been evolving so fast that all of us are trying to find answers. So this session is going to be nothing about no pearls of wisdom, but essentially each one of us trying to find the answers and a sharing mechanism of what else to think about. Some of the questions get you thinking about, yep, maybe that's part of it that I had never thought about, right? So I think It's time for all of us to learn, all of us to be agile and try to see what's coming up. So in my life, I haven't seen something like this, and it's the same for most of us, right? So we are in very, very interesting times. That's the way that I would look at it. And look forward to having an interactive session with the folks out here.
Yeah, cool. So then without wasting much time, let's begin with taking the queries. We have a question from Santosh Gurumurthy, who asks, what are the evolving or game-changing business scenarios after this crisis, after the COVID crisis?
And as I was saying, this is one of those cases which you find, it's so evolving that things have been changing, and all of us have been coming up with new scenarios. So one is, of course, the most obvious, which is things which are moving online. But there have been new things that have been evolving, something like, for example, globalization to regionalization, so to say, right? So that's I think is one of the things that's going to be a big challenge for businesses going forward, at least in the next few years. Supply chains changing, disrupting supply chains, and then looking for local options, customers who may just disappear, who are outside India, or in other geographies may disappear. Workforces is not going to be as mobile as earlier. So these are all going to be business scenarios that are going to be changing, right? And apart from the fact that the whole physical contact and the social distancing is going to be here for some time to come. So, and is that going to leave a permanent change in the way that we do things, or is this going to be temporal for the next couple of years? Are all things that we would need to see as it evolves. And it's the time when every entrepreneur would need to keep thinking about not only about what do I have to deal with today, but what could be the potential that's going to come forward. And that's going to be the biggest challenge for the entrepreneurs. The globalization to regionalization is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that is going to happen. And that's that's something that we are all not prepared for. We've all got so used to working, in a globalized world, that to now start thinking the other way around is going to be a big challenge.
True. The next question we have is from Shyam Sundar Nagarajan, who asks, how do we ensure that customers purchase discretionary items that need high investments like IT software, which have tendencies to be postponed due to the economic downturn? Do we need to trim down our offering to fit the budget, or do we need to be creative to create a possible opportunity during the downturn?
Good question. But the discretionary itself, I would put it across in two buckets. One is what's related to personal discretionary, where companies are looking at consumers and customers who have personal discretionary purchases. That's going to be a bit more difficult at this point of time. But for businesses which are dealing with discretionary purchases, I think that this could open up some options for businesses to look at, right? So, for example, can you build a much stronger business proposition for the customer, which looks working with the customer, something that would help them build their top line or their bottom line, help them with their bottom line? Is there a way that you could lock in the customer with a longer period. So with a more telescopic payment, So it's, for example, it's a customer that you would want to retain for long term. Why would you not tell the customer, okay, let's get into a 3-year arrangement or a 5-year arrangement, and you pay me maybe a fraction of what you would normally pay, right? But that way, then you are retaining a customer for a longer period. So or it could be, for example, if there's in the case of some customers, you could look at whether it could be a goal-based customer engagement could be there. So those are things that you would need to think of. Are there ways that I can look at it from a longer term and then help retain the customer and help the customer make that choice of not walking away, but saying that, okay, let me retain this because this might get me better value, right? So I think it's up to the entrepreneur to see how they could convert the discretionary, but it's a challenge. It's not going to be easy, but the challenges could get the best of what you could do in terms from a longer time. But telescopic payments, goal-based, are all things that people should explore.
Okay. The next question is from Abhishek Tiwari, who asks, he's actually asking 3 questions. How to deal with employee sustainability in this particular period? What measures can be taken to make relationship with customers, and what should be the financial measures taken by a startup? So employee sustainability, relationship with customers, and financial measures that a startup could take.
So employee sustainability, it's one of the biggest things at this point of time, because on one hand, you have the employees to be retained. So you would want to see, can I cut costs? Can I cut back on people? But it's also the period when you know that the employee also doesn't have another option to go to. So it's actually a very, very drastic decision that you would need to take. Yes, you may have to take in some cases, but if you do see that your potential to come back is visible in the next 6 to 9 months, and that it's not a drastic scenario for you, then you should look at, working with your employees to see, is there a sustenance plan that you can put in place with a more, back-ended payment options linked to how the business comes up. So, if you can retain your employees to the extent possible, that would be good. Both from your business perspective, when it starts coming back to normal, as well as when just from building the employees' long-term engagement with you. I mean, if you can retain that employee now, I think it's going to help you in the long run as well, right? But of course, there are some cases where you don't have the cash and you may have to let go, but try and put in place at least some things by which you can retain that relationship with that employee so that you can call them back. But if you can retain them with cutting back on salaries, but giving them ESOPs, that's the best way that I would say is effective. Employees, and also in terms of this part, at this particular period, you would need to look at additional spend for whether it is the health of the customer, of the employee, or the mental well-being of the employee is very, very critical. So those are additional things that you would need to invest in much more than just the salary costs as well. The second one was on the customer that you said, right? So obviously the customer is, if not the second or the topmost after your employees, or with your employees, is going to be a customer, because without the customer, you're not going to be able to get back in shape. So having the transparent communication with your customer is very, very important. And also to try to see is the fact that the customer is also making his choices of whether they should retain you or not. Whether you are in one of those buckets, which they say is a fact, can I cut this expenditure out, right? It's possible. So the more you engage with your customer and try to see is the fact that if you can work with the customer's goals, right? And that you can retain the customer for the longer run, that will be good. Right. So, for example, one of our portfolio companies was actually talking to their customers who had booked orders, but you cannot ship it to them now. But they've been trying to retain that open line of communication with the customers, hoping that, when they can start delivering, that the customer is not going to cancel the order. And similarly, I know keeping that line of communication, over communicating with your customer, trying to find out what are the customer's goals and where do you lie in that customer's priority of stuff, and trying to see that you can get onto the top of that priority list becomes very, very important, right? And also working with the cash flows of the customer. So for example, there was a case recently where I was talking to, where the customer, where the landlord said that, if they could pay 6 months in advance, he was willing to take a 60% cut in the rent, right? And that was a whopping thing. But for that landlord, that made a huge difference because there's some consignment was stuck and whatever, right? That 6 months, this company could afford to do that 6 month thing. But that was something by which you could work that out. So I think, working that out with your customers also become important to try to see whether it's your employee or your customer, trying to see how you could work within their priority list and their cash flows would be two most important things that you would do, right? And the third thing was on the financial measures. The financial measures, I think this has been the most cliched thing of how you would need to look at cutting costs, looking at top line growth, creating a runway. I mean, whether if you're raising funds, try to get more funds so that you can have a longer runway. But essentially, raise more money than you need, try to keep more money than you need, because this could be a much longer turnaround cycle. And it's better to be prepared for the worst. So I would say it's a fact that a year is a safe estimate to say that for things to get back to some semblance of normalcy.
Okay. The next question is from Manas Ganguly, who asks, startup founders like myself have an interesting conundrum, whether we acquire and build assets at cheap rates or whether we conserve cash. Another interesting set of consideration is, since the prospective chain is disrupted, does one invest in decking the prospects and increasing the funnel so that cash flows begin sooner after lockdowns, or do we hold on to cash reserves? How does one prioritize on such decisions?
Good question. But again, it comes back to what is the cash balance that you have, right? So first and foremost is the fact that you've got to have a runway to say that you can survive for 9 months to 12 months, even if you're operating, at maybe 25% of your capacity or whatever, numbers that would differ from case to case. Because, for example, if you're in the travel industry, it's going to be pretty bleak for some time to come, right? So it all depends on which industry you are and what is the likely bounce back. But even in the best case scenarios, even in sectors which are important and which are not non-discretionary, there's going to be a setback of close to maybe 6 to 9 months or longer, right? So the cash flow that you have, which is, if you can have visibility for up to about a year, that's a best case scenario that you could possibly have. And if you have that, then you start working out, should I block my capital? Do I have more excess that I can block in capital in inventory? Which means that, I can set off against the fact that my interest rates are also lower. So, can I block it in inventory? Or should I spend money on building out a prospective chain, which may not happen after lockdown, but could be 6 months later? But do you have money to survive for the 6 months before, let's say, it's business as normal for you, right? So you would need to just consider that on a case-on-case basis. But at no point of time you should lose sight of the fact that you've got to have the money in the bank to keep you going till, in a worst-case scenario, which could be 9 months to 12 months, right? I'm more optimistic to say is the fact that, it's not going to be, things will never get back to normal. I'm sure that, history has shown us that there's always getting back to normalcy. So I think that would happen, but just prioritize it to ensure that you have the money in the bank, and then spend on whether you want to block it on inventory, whether you would want to build your pipeline, to make those decisions based on that.
Sure. We have Diksha who has two questions. How can service sector startups, primarily business consulting, use the current situation as an opportunity to stand out or grow? The second one is, on account of cost cutting, should startups expect business to flow out of the bigger firms and into the hands of startups?
So first, on the business consulting side, I would say that it's also an opportunity for business consulting companies to start exploring new areas, right? I mean, so you would never, the HR management, workflow management with work moving to home, which is work from home, or distance engagement. These are not areas that people were looking at till recently, right? I mean, it was not even in our conscious thinking at all. So it's actually a huge opportunity for business consulting to start looking at how would the new workflow environments is going to change, and there's going to open up actually a lot of opportunities for business consulting. There's again going to be a whole lot around supply chain disruptions, because as I said, there's going to be a lot more globalization to regionalization. And this is going to open up a lot more opportunities for business consulting. So I think business consulting is one area I don't see things going down. Yes, they may need to negotiate on the pricing part of it. So a lot of it could be based on success-based payouts, could be there. There could be telescopic payments, but I don't think the assignments would go down. Actually, there are lots of new things that would come up now, which was not foreseen or which were not there earlier on as well. Supply chains, workflow management, etc. is one thing. Cost cutting should startups expect to flow business? One thing is the fact that one fear that most folks would have is about early stage or smaller companies is the business continuity, because you wouldn't want to be in a situation where you are committing to something where the company may not exist, right? So it's important that's where, to the earlier question where we were talking of customers, maintaining that relationship with customers is very, very important. Being transparent, and in fact, giving the confidence to the customer that you have enough cash flows to be able to survive this is important. That you will have people to deliver those services, right? And if you can do that, you have a fair chance of being able to retain the customer. Because one reason why a customer would walk away from you is because of fear on their minds. So you need to address that fear right up front to the customer, that you're here for the long run, that you have the ability to withstand, that you have the people and that you can actually deliver, right? That transparency and over communicating with them and giving that confidence to that customer is what is important. But otherwise, I agree that this could be, also be a reason why people would move to larger organizations, because for sure that they would exist. But they could exist. I mean, larger organizations could also fold up with the new scenarios, but at least you still feel that they may have a lot more staying power. And this is where it's again up to the entrepreneur, the early stage entrepreneurs, to be able to work with their customers on this.
Convince them.
Convince them. And to give them, to give them the confidence and to be transparent. So the transparency helps, right? And even if you have a cash flow problem, but being able to put that out to the customer of what you would need and how you'd need, that also helps in building that confidence. So building that confidence in people that you're here for the long run, that you're looking to work towards that you can deliver. That you can deliver is the most important thing that people want to be sure of. If they don't want, there is anyway uncertainty. You don't want to add one more uncertainty. That's right. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah, fair enough. We have Uttaran who asks, is it a good time to start a business during this time of crisis or during times of crisis like this?
Well, most entrepreneurs and businesses have come out during challenging times. So I think, yes, if you know, if there is a customer and you think you can deliver that, of course, by all means, and you can, you can get the capital to do that. Why would you not? Yes, of course you should.
Sure. Rishabh Mehra asks, is it true that you need a substantial capital to start a medium-sized business, or are there ways to raise safe capital from day one? Problem is if you have a good idea which requires capital, but you don't have money.
Unfortunately, one is that there's nothing as safe capital. There's everything comes at a cost. There's no free lunches, right? What is important is that you have enough capital to do your business of the appropriate scale, right? So it's sometimes, for example, if it's basically a large business opportunity, and it's let's say as a fact it requires a huge tech investment, then you can't run it as an SME business because you have to, for example, have a seamless experience like how you had it with Uber and Ola. There was a lot of tech investment that was involved. You can't run it with a small scale in a particular locality, right? With that kind of an investment that was done. So it all depends, but you could run a small a travel business or a taxi travel business in a small locality. So it's your business idea and what is the appropriate scale for that business that you need to evaluate, right? Many times what happens is the fact that companies undercapitalize or underraise the capital because they feel that I shouldn't liquidate or they want to go slow on it, this case. Then you're actually building a business not to scale, not for the appropriate scale. And which would mean that in the long term that you may not be able to exist. Right? So it's important to design or to see what is a scale that your business or your idea needs. If it's an SME business, then it should be an SME business. Then don't try to raise $1 billion for an SME business or go to VCs with that because it's primarily not something that you need. But if it's your business that needs to scale, then you have to raise that capital. Idea and you want to raise money, I'm sure, but of course there are angels, look for them.
Sure. We have Sumit Mittal who asked, how will seed stage fund be affected due to COVID-19? And how do you see prospects of a vernacular anonymous platform promoting mental wellness during such times?
So one is that, there are lots of funds that are in their early stages of their deployment period now, right? So I don't think that funding per se would stop. Yes, it may get a bit slower because, whether it's due diligence or whether it is site visits, all of those get postponed. So, or plus people want to, especially now it's a very peak uncertain period of this 1 month of the lockdown, let's say. But otherwise, the funding is not going to stop. We as a fund, for example, are in the process of closing out a few deals as we speak. So it's not that funding would stop completely as well. So I would urge all those who have ideas to start, to continue talking to VCs as such. I don't think that that's going to stop as well, right? If that's what the question meant, was saying that, seed stage funds are going to be affected, I would say there's enough funds that are available. If that's a question, that's fine. On the vernacular anonymous platform for mental wellness, I think yes. I think I don't think that, of the 2-3 generations that coexist today in the world today have seen the kind of uncertainty that this has brought about, right? And so that's such a huge thing that that the uncertainty and the fact that you are in nuclear families, that there's a disruption, there's an immense disruption. I mean, it's like it's just that, and the fact that there's so much of fear psychosis of being infected that I think it's going to be a huge issue. So I think that the ability to have to offer wellness platforms is pretty high, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. The next question is from Sumit Agrawal, who asks, I'm in a product-based company, so we have to sell our products to make money. In this pandemic, our salespersons cannot go out and reach to customers for product demonstrations and sales. We also sell on Amazon and Flipkart, but due to lack of transportation, we are unable to ship products. So it is the most difficult time for our company to survive. What should we do in this pandemic to help keep our startup alive?
So one is the transportation thing should kind of get resolved, in a couple of weeks' time. So there is a disruption, I agree, but that should get sorted out much earlier than the other problems that are there. The physical touch is obviously going to remain there for a long time. That's not going to go away in the near future, right? I mean, even if your salesman is willing to go out and meet a customer, the customer may not be willing to meet you, right? So the opportunity for doing online demonstrations is live streaming. You'll need to look at how I'm going to make more virtual sales pitches. That's one. You may have to, your business model may need to evolve with a lot more returnable options to be able to give that, because if that's something that requires a touch and feel, that irrespective of what you do with live streaming, you may get back. So, but that may have to be built into your business model. So you will need to look for the fact that is going to be the new normal for at least the next year or so, that it's going to be there. And if that becomes the second nature to most folks, because we just don't know how the consumer behavior would change, right? And so if that changes, then that may become the normal in the long run as well. So you've got to be prepared for the fact that this is how it will continue to be there, and how you could continue to have these online versions. That's something that you have to. But transportation, I think, would get resolved in the near future.
Yeah. Rajiv Kemal asks, during this COVID crisis, when most of the companies, especially startups, are finding it extremely difficult to do business and raise funds to stay afloat, would you be open to new investments in impactful startups? If yes, what are the 3 things that you would look at in the startup to enable you to make that decision to invest or not in this challenging time?
So one, as I mentioned earlier as well to the earlier question, yes, we are continuing to invest. Right. So I think our fund is in early stage of its life cycle. So we would definitely invest is one thing. Right. On the what would we look for? It's the primary thing about the entrepreneur and the business model is not going to change, right? So that's something that we would, whether the entrepreneur has that, the evaluation of the entrepreneur is going to be the topmost, that I would say, right? And in that, the entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs' agility and their willingness and their ability to look at this whole uncertain periods and to be able to be how innovative they are all indicators. And all of us know that this is not about certainty. It's not like the entrepreneur saying, I will do this and this will work, because we all know that it's uncertain times. But the fact that if the entrepreneur can continue to think about and is being agile and can look at different scenarios, especially the scenario planning becomes very, very important, right? And so that's something that you would evaluate. The other thing is obviously now the whole discretionary versus non-discretionary becomes an important task. Wherever it is non-discretionary, it's obviously going to be that the capital raise might become a little more difficult than the other times, right? So that's an important thing that would be part of the evaluation. The third most thing I would say is in terms of the capital being raised. Is the capital being raised, which would give it a runway of up to at least 12 to 18 months. 18 months runway is very, very critical at this point of time. Because if you're fundraising now, if you're an existing company, then at least a 12-month runway is important. But if you are looking at a 18-month runway, if you're raising capital now for a new idea, then an 18-month runway is very, very important, right? And is the entrepreneur raising that kind of capital? If we cannot bring in the entire 18-month capital, are there other investors that they can pull in would be very important. And also in terms of the capital being raised, will they be able to reach the milestones that are there for the next fundraise? Those all become very, very critical evaluation partnership. So the entrepreneur evaluation, the discretionary, non-discretionary, capital raise, those are things that would be there, right? I mean, apart from the fact that you're looking at the business model and the customer and stuff around that.
Sure. Kakuli asks, will there be a gradual shift to more contractual roles for knowledge laborers and experts who are otherwise drawing a paycheck, perks, and other benefits? Will that be a good strategic move for an immediate cost cut on retaining good talent and avoiding mass job losses due to redundancies?
Yes, that's possible, no doubt. But I would also say that there's the other side of the coin too, right? And one of the fears that people would have is that you would rather prefer to have a more secure, longer-term job than be on the gig economy at this point of time, because then you feel that, oh, what if I don't? Well, I would be the first one to get cut off if the company is going through trouble. So, so it's a psychological thing as well. So you will need to look at it on a case-on-case basis. I don't think there's a right or wrong about it, but it's not one-way street. It's not that it's going to be much easier for knowledge workers to be moved to the gig economy. Yes, from the entrepreneur's side, it's a much better option because you're converting something to be a variable cost, right? But would that employee go, or would that person go towards a more secure job, feeling that I'm okay to go on 50%, but I know that I have it with me, then you might be in trouble. So you've got to take that on a case-on-case basis as to if the entrepreneur themselves feel that, if the employee themselves is looking for something like that, then it's fine. That's something that you'll have to evaluate that. But look at it that it's not a one-way thing, but it's two ways that it would happen.
Yeah. Mukul asks, what sectors are expected to boom according to you?
Sectors. Of course, anything which is non-contact would all be there, right? I'm sure that first thing is the fact entertainment is going to go up because there's going to be a lot of people sitting at home. The whole entertainment sector would obviously be there as one. The other things that would possibly be would be, let's say, the food, agri-tech kind of things that would continue to be there because people are not going to stop eating. Similarly, health, wellness, those are things that would continue because these would be on top of, on your monthly budget. This is going to be right on top of what you would spend on. So I think those would continue to remain there. There are some that would change because of consumer behavior changes, right? Globally, online education has been around for 2 decades plus, 2.5 decades, but it's really never scaled up to the extent that it has it's been touted about. That's because of the fact that the consumer behavior was not there to embrace it fully. But would things change from now? Maybe, right? I mean, is this for a short-term change or a long-term change? Only time would say. But change is possible. That the whole fear of contact is something that might force people to move towards this, and this might change the way people would do things. So I think that the whole non-contact things, there is a potential that this is the way in which that might change the human behavior in the long run, that this one event could change it. That only time would say. But those are things that you would bet on is one, right? Apart from the discretion. Yeah, apart from the ones which are non-discretionary.
Yeah. Devang Rao asks how...
I'm sorry, I would also want to add there, things that could potentially, from a technology perspective, people should look at as a fact that, the whole remote working, workflow management for remote working, both from the employee side as well as, or from individuals, personal side as well as from organization side, is a huge opportunity, because whether it is both hardware, software, in terms of cyber securities, that's going to boom like anything as well, right? So apart from the consumer as an individual consumer, what I would do versus what organizations would spend on, right? So it's a big business out there for anyone who's looking at that area as well.
Sure. Devang asks, how will the lockdown affect industries or businesses which are credit based, especially textile industry, because we have a credit cycle of 40 days?
See, if you have a customer and if you have business, then credit is not an issue, right? The biggest challenge today is the fact lots of businesses are coming to zero because of the fact that, you don't have people. Hotels don't have any customers coming in. Right? So it's going to be, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, the hotels are not going to get people walking in the near future. So I think the worry is not so much as about credit being available, but is the business going to exist? If the business exists, then I'm pretty much sure that you would be able to work around that. So whether it's a credit from the customer or a bank, because today the bank also doesn't know, a bank does not have enough credit-worthy customers, right? I mean, they don't. If their customer base doesn't have a business, whom do they lend to? So if you have a business and you have customers and you can tell them, they would definitely be able to lend it to you against that. So the primary concern is the fact, do you have business or not, more than anything else. And I think if you have that, you can definitely look at the business, the credit coming in. That's the way that I would look at it as.
Sure. Anand asks, how should the marketing strategies be designed for B2B and B2C, as the entire paradigm of business will change after the COVID pandemic?
Absolutely. And so first of all is the fact that the one top thing that, customers are looking for is trust, right? Earlier, you never had to play so much on trust as you have to today. Today, every customer, is the trust is going to be the topmost priority that you're looking at. So your whole marketing strategy is going to remain as to look at how are you going to do that as one. You're going to be able to talk a lot more about safety. You're going to talk a lot more about wellness. So the whole, the strategy is going to be a lot more around the customer as an individual, as a customer having a more non-economical reason to be your customer, right? So I think that the whole, the approach itself is going to be different, because you're now talking to a customer from a very emotional perspective rather than from just a logical business perspective. So I think that is primarily going to be one of the biggest drivers of change in the way the marketing strategies would work, right? I mean, that's going to be the change. And then from a B2B, B2C, there are enough examples of how now China companies have been dealing with it, of how they have reached out to their customers, how they're building the businesses back. There's a lot more around individual safety and stuff around that, and how they have been able to reach out to customers. I think there are enough to read about from the Chinese experiences as well. But I think primarily this is one reason this is one area that's going to change. That it's not going to be just a logical, rational reasoning for the consumer, but it's going to be a lot more emotional that would need to be there. Right. And that whether it's a B2B or B2C, because even in B2B, like we discussed earlier, the trust is going to be a major issue. Would you be business continuity is going to be an issue. So those are things that you would need to communicate all that to your consumer. So there's going to be a lot more content that you would need to put out to your consumer, to your customer than earlier. And that content would need to be a lot on those lines.
Sure. This is the last question we have from Prashant Mathur, who's asking, is it a good time to apply for loan for the purpose of cash flow, primarily for operational expenditure? The other thing he asks is it a good time to go for company valuation to approach future financing?
So the first part of it is cash flow. I would say the fact that
should you go for loan?
If your business can afford to pay for the interest costs, then you should definitely, right, is one. If you already have a line of credit that you have, then yes, continue to have that, because that's a fallback option that you have. But if you want to over leverage yourself now, then I would hesitate, because especially around the uncertainty that you have, over leveraging yourself could land you in trouble in the long run. Right? So this is perhaps not the time to over leverage, but it's obviously on a case-to-case basis, depending upon how you see your business panning out. If you're in a business which is non-discretionary, that you would definitely look at. You may be willing to take a line of credit, let's say, against, let's say, a customer order, perhaps, let's say. So it all depends on a case-on-case basis. But but for a burn, I would hesitate to take that, because then for a burn, you wouldn't be leveraging yourself these days because of the uncertainty, let's say. I didn't understand the company valuation part of it. Is it company valuation to say that, are you okay with a lower valuation in order to get more funding, or build towards a higher valuation? I didn't get that question.
Okay, maybe he can reach out to us post this session on our email, elaborate a bit on his question. We have a few online queries, like from our online attendees. Yashwant asks, how do you see education landscape changing in India in 10 years with the development of AI, AR, VR, etc.? If it is different for primary and higher education space, please delve into it. I guess we deliberated on that a bit earlier in the session, but maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, he's not talking of COVID especially, but he's talking of 10 years. Yeah, 10 years is a long time. I mean, nobody thought even a month back, less than a month back, before we looked at the lockdown, before we saw the numbers go up in Italy and France, it never sounded so alarming at all, right? I mean, so things have changed so much in the last 3 months that it's really it's difficult to say what would change, right? But having said that, I do think that this is a point where perhaps there is going to be some consumer behavior change. That's more permanent than earlier is one thing. I mean, the way things have changed, it looks like that. Yeah, but we could all be wrong. Is one thing. So I think this could perhaps more, even otherwise, while there was the whole social media and being connected on social media had been a behavior change that had happened in the last decade or so, that you were more connected on social media than with your neighbors, was a reality that we existed with, right? And this could perhaps strengthen it even further, is where that's there. So the same way, even the ability to study individually versus being in a peer group might, or be on a virtual peer group, might be a change that might happen, right? So I think that that's a change that perhaps that this might bring about. As far as machine learning and all goes, I would hesitate to put too much on that as far as education goes. I think I would still primarily on the fact that there is a significant amount of both teaching and peer learning that I would say would not go away that easily, right? It's at an individual self-learning is different, but from a school perspective, I think that would still continue to be there. So there could be some efficiencies in terms of machine learning and artificial intelligence and blah, blah, blah. But I would not say that education per se would have a huge, I think there could be some elements of it, but that's not going to be the core of it. But the way we learn might change a bit.
Sure. Bala asks, with the growth at all cost theory slowly going out of the window and revenue getting hit hard during this crisis, what should early stage founders focus on? Which investors would be interested in?
Good question. These are all things that keep changing so much that you never know. That growth at all costs might be the norm again 6 months from now or 9 months from now, right? That's a difficult one to say how people would look at it, because that's a more matter of how the industry changes, right? And so it's always seen as a fact that when you had a downturn and then when you go up, there could be a scaling up that happens pretty quickly as well. So I won't say that growth at costs would be gone forever, but fundamentally, folks who have ambition would still be the drivers. So entrepreneurs who have the risk-taking ability, who have the drive and the ambition, would definitely get the capital than the folks who might not be willing to take that kind of risks. So risk is primarily not going to go away, right? And the entrepreneur and the risk, the conundrum would still remain as such, the core of it. I don't think that would change in the long run. That didn't change when the World War took place, or anyway. There could be slight ups and downs, but it's always in terms of which sectors would receive the money, but it doesn't go away. And the risk-taking ability of the entrepreneur would remain. Now, the growth, if the opportunity is there and there is that thing there, then I think that the capital, because there is capital, right? At the end of it, even in this times as well, there is capital. It's not that the capital has gone away. There's enough capital, that's it. And given the fact that the deposit rates are going to be so low, that globally people are going to be looking at how do I where do I put my money in? So that would definitely be there. I don't think that would go away. So it may not be growth at all capital cost, but it'll be growth in the sectors that you see, in specific areas that you see that might still attract capital, I would say. Yeah. But I think overall, always investors would look at how the overall unit economics is something most investors continue to look in the past and will continue to look in the future as well. It never was growth at all costs. Yes, in some cases maybe, but those are far and fewer in between. More often than not, it's always a considered decision, and that considered decision will continue to be there.
Sure. Pratham asks, I run a furniture brand. I don't want to reduce my sales team. How do I make use of their time?
Good question. Well, why don't you talk to a lot of customers and do free online interior designing options for them, right? I mean, you have enough Instagram pictures and online resources available. So try to connect with your customers online. If you have people who are sitting, you might be able to get your sales guys to say, as a fact, cut back on some costs on their salaries a bit, which gets paid out later based on success. But talk to customers to say, as a fact, why don't I plan for your future? So 6 months from now, maybe, but you still are giving the person enough ideas that are there. So I think you can play with online media to reach out to your customers.
Sure. Smita asks, we have products to test for food quality. B2B sees this as an add-on cost than quality value addition. Should we pivot to B2C nutraceutical, which may have a good future?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that question? I'm sorry, I lost you for a second.
Yeah. She asks, we have products to test for food quality. B2B sees this as an add-on cost than quality value addition. Should she pivot to B2C nutraceutical, which may have a good future?
Well, B2B as well. I think that if it's about food quality, I think the fear that people have as to what they're eating today and whether it's contaminated, whatever quality is, I think, foremost on people's minds. And when you now have a shortage, or rather a perceived shortage of, in many cases, and there's hoarding taking place, people are concerned about the quality. So I think businesses will also not stop investing in quality. I think good brands will continue to invest in quality. I think individuals will also continue to look at it. I don't see any reason why you should pivot completely. You might de-risk yourself by adding B2C as your customer, but I don't see B2B completely stopping themselves from quality, because the B2B actually should now focus a lot more. So you may have to work with your B2B customers to say the fact that by looking at food quality, you are building on your customers' trust value, right? And their customers' trust value. So I think that trust is the most important thing, and quality is one of the major reasons for trust. So you're in a good place. I don't see that, you should be able to build that value and that communication of how you would build that, how you could help build that trust.
Sure. Since we are running out of time, let's just take the last question from online attendees. Nabin Roy asks, what would be the priority for VCs in the current scenario? Would you look for new opportunity for investment, or would you prefer to safeguard your current portfolio companies?
See, it depends on the stage of your fund, right? If you are in the first 2 years of your fund and are deploying, then you would continue to deploy. You're not going to stop deploying this way. If you have already a portfolio in place, which is like 75% in place or whatever, then you might decide to hold back because you may want to invest. Similarly, if you have 3 or 4 funds already, then you may need to conserve your cash to put into your earlier funds. But if you're just 1 or 2 funds, then you're unlikely to cut back on new investments. So it would be a combination of these 2 factors, that what stage are you in your current fund? If you're in the earlier stages of your fund, then you would continue to invest. You're not going to stop because we're also, the same as you guys are, we're also fundraising with a particular time horizon to return the money back. So we're also on a treadmill. So we do have to invest if we are in the early stages. And also if you're 1-2 funds, then obviously the portfolio is not large enough that you would need to conserve too much of cash. So those are 2 broad areas that I would say. Based on that, the decisions would be taken.
Sure. So I guess that's it for today. Thank you, Rema. Do you have some remarks for our startups?
I'm sorry?
Log off. Do you have some closing remarks for our startups before we log off?
No, I just want to tell folks that don't get despondent. This is also a time to just enjoy life as is as well. I mean, it's a good time to just be able to get up maybe a little bit later, spend time with your family. Whether it's necessary or not, it's also a time I find that people are trying to connect with folks they haven't been in touch with for some time. So these are all positive things that you're doing. So don't get despondent. The world will not come to an end. We all have another day to live. We all have better things to look forward to. So it's just the way that we live might change. So don't get despondent, be happy, and don't get too depressed or any such thing. Take care of your mental well-being as much as about your monetary well-being and physical well-being.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Rema. I'm sure the startups have gained much insight from today's session. Thank you to the audience who joined us, and thank you to Tai, who helped us organize this session. Rema herself is a charter member of Tai Delhi NCR. So thank you to all of you who joined us. If you have any further queries, you can write to us at dipp-startups@nic.in, and keep following our Startup India Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn to know of more such webinars and sessions that we'll be coming up with. Thank you. Thank you, Rema.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.